You feel pain like no other pain, and you know that in your life it's going to be very difficult to...
The room had been prepared for a quiet royal gathering, but nothing about what followed was quiet. Prince William stood beside a chair, linked forever to the memory of Diana, paused as every face turned toward him, and delivered a sentence that cut through decades of carefully managed silence. "Camilla will never sit where my mum sat." In that instant, a family disagreement became a battle over memory, loyalty, and the future identity of the monarchy. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. William had entered the private Windsor gathering, knowing exactly what was at stake. Senior family members were discussing arrangements for an upcoming memorial dinner honoring royal women whose public service had shaped the crown. Windsor was not merely a residence that evening, it had become the place where private grief collided with royal protocol, the system of rules governing ceremonial order and family precedence. Charles, Anne, Catherine, and several senior aides expected a controlled discussion. The prince shattered that expectation. The disputed chair had once been used by Diana during intimate family occasions. Over time, it had become more than furniture inside William's personal world. It represented a place his mother had occupied before public pain, broken trust, and tragedy transformed her into a memory others constantly tried to define. To him, seating Camilla there would not be a harmless decision. It would feel like replacing Diana inside the family itself. Charles slowly removed his glasses. The king asked whether his son understood the humiliation those words would cause his wife. William did not retreat. He answered that some symbols could not be reassigned simply because time had passed. His voice remained controlled, but years of restrained anger stood behind every word. Camilla did not argue. The queen consort gripped the edge of the table and stared at the empty chair before quietly asking whether the decision concerned one evening or her permanent place within the family. Her question changed the tension. This was no longer only about Diana. It was about whether she would forever remain measured against a woman she could never answer. Anne watched both sides carefully. Then the Princess Royal noticed the handwritten seating plan in William's hand, marked with Catherine's initials. The discovery suggested that the declaration had been considered before the meeting, and that his wife understood exactly what he intended to defend. Charles left without answering. Camilla remained behind, turned toward Anne, and said the confrontation had begun long before anyone entered Windsor that evening. But to understand why one chair could divide a king, a queen, and the heir to the throne, the private wounds carried by each of them must first be brought into the light. This was never simply a struggle over furniture, ceremony, or royal etiquette. For William, the chair carried the voice of a mother he lost too young. For Charles, it represented a past he had spent years trying to survive. And for Camilla, it became proof that no title, crown, or public acceptance could fully protect her from Diana's shadow. 3 people entered the dispute, carrying 3 different versions of history, and none of them believed they could afford to surrender. William had spent years guarding Diana's legacy, especially inside private family spaces, where he believed memory should remain beyond palace image management. Public protocol was one thing. It was the system of formal rules deciding rank, order, and ceremonial placement. But a family room carried a different meaning. To the prince, it held emotional history. And emotional history could not simply be reassigned because the monarchy wanted a cleaner story. William stood alone beside a window after the gathering and told Catherine he could tolerate public compromise, but not this. He could accept Camilla's official position, support his father, and protect the crown without allowing his mother's personal place to be quietly erased. Catherine then revealed that he had objected twice before. Each time, palace staff revised the seating plan and placed Camilla's name beside Diana's former chair again. Camilla returned to her rooms with Charles and removed a bracelet with trembling fingers. The queen consort admitted that William's words had made her feel like an intruder, despite years beside the sovereign. She had endured public anger, private suspicion, and endless comparison, Yet this rejection felt different because it came from inside the family she had tried to serve. Charles listened, but his pain quickly hardened into suspicion. The king discovered that the final seating chart had been approved through his own household. A royal household meant the private staff and advisors managing a senior figure's duties and arrangements. He began to believe his son's declaration was not only about Diana, it was also a direct challenge to his authority and to the legitimacy he had spent years building around his wife. Anne found Charles alone with the document folded in half. The Princess Royal watched her brother struggle between anger and exhaustion. He did not raise his voice. He only asked whether his family would ever allow the past to remain in the past. She answered with a warning. William was not fighting history. He was reacting to a private ceremony weeks earlier that convinced him Diana's memory was being deliberately replaced. And when Anne finally named the ceremony that had pushed William beyond restraint, the empty chair began to look less like a symbol and more like evidence. Every royal rupture has a moment that later feels inevitable. This one began 3 weeks earlier, inside a candlelit gallery at Kensington Palace, during a private ceremony intended to honor Diana's charitable legacy. William had expected remembrance. Instead, he watched Camilla being guided toward his mother's former ceremonial position, while an aide quietly removed Diana's engraved name card. To everyone else, it looked like a minor adjustment. To her eldest son, it was the point of no return. William had arrived with Catherine believing the evening would honor Diana's work with the causes she had once championed. Charles, Camilla, Anne, and representatives from several charities were also present, each expecting a dignified tribute rather than confrontation. The ceremonial chair had traditionally remained empty during these gatherings. It was not an active royal seat, but a deliberate gesture of remembrance, preserving a private space for the woman whose absence still shaped the family. A senior courtier changed everything moments before the ceremony began. He removed Diana's engraved name card, placed Camilla's program on the chair, and told William the arrangement reflected the present order of the monarchy. That phrase meant the current structure of royal rank and public authority, but to the prince, it sounded like an official excuse for erasure. William crossed the gallery immediately. He lifted the program from the seat and asked who had authorized the change. Catherine watched his control begin to fracture as the courtier avoided a direct answer. Camilla, embarrassed before the gathered guests, insisted she had never requested the position. Yet she remained beside the chair, and her hesitation felt like acceptance to a son already convinced the decision had been planned. Anne began asking questions after the ceremony. The Princess Royal later discovered through a documented household instruction that the order had come from Charles's staff as part of a wider plan to standardize the Queen's position at senior family events. Standardizing meant placing Camilla in the same recognized role at every major gathering, regardless of the private history attached to individual rooms or traditions. Catherine uncovered something even more troubling. A second draft of the ceremony notes shortened Diana's commemorative reference while expanding Camilla's role. She showed the document to William privately, confirming his fear that the change was not accidental. It was strategic. William refused to confront his father before the guests that night. Instead, he told Catherine that if the same attempt appeared at Windsor, he would stop it in front of everyone. 3 weeks later, when Camilla's name appeared beside the same symbolic place, William kept that promise and forced his father into the confrontation the palace had feared. The public statement had stunned the room, but the true confrontation began after the witnesses were removed. Charles ordered the doors closed. William remained standing. Between them lay the altered seating plan, Diana's memory, and years of words neither man had dared to say directly. The king demanded respect for his wife. His son demanded protection for his mother's place. Then Charles pushed the disputed chair toward William and asked whether he valued a symbol more than the family standing before him. Charles dismissed the aides first, then asked Anne and Catherine to leave. The private audience, meaning a closed meeting with no officials present, stripped away every layer of royal protection. No courtier could soften the language. No advisor could interrupt. William refused to sit, making it clear that he did not see this as a negotiation over protocol. To him, the boundary had already been crossed. The king accused his son of punishing Camilla for choices made decades earlier. He warned that humiliating the queen weakened the sovereign as well, because attacking her public place also damaged the authority of the man beside her. William answered without hesitation. The crown could not demand forgiveness by physically placing one woman into the space associated with another, especially when the woman being displaced was his mother. Charles gripped the back of Diana's former chair and pushed it across the floor. William stopped it with one hand. He held his father's gaze, then moved the chair back to its original position. The gesture said what neither man could fully express. One was defending the present, while the other refused to let the past be rewritten for convenience. William then produced copies of the Kensington ceremony drafts. He explained that Catherine had preserved both versions after noticing Diana's commemorative reference had been shortened as Camilla's ceremonial prominence increased. The revisions were documented, dated, and marked by hand. This was no emotional suspicion, it was evidence. Charles studied the pages and recognized the handwriting of one of his closest advisors. His expression changed, but he refused to say whether he had personally approved the wider plan. That silence wounded William more than an admission might have done. The door opened before either man could continue. Camilla had heard the final exchange. She stepped inside, looked from Charles to William, and declared that neither of them would decide her next move without speaking to her directly. For the first time, the woman at the center of the conflict stepped between the king and his heir and prepared to reveal how much power she was truly willing to surrender. Royal power rarely announces itself with raised voices. It moves through schedules, seating plans, household approvals, and decisions made before a family enters the room. As William's declaration spread through the palace, the question changed. This was no longer only about grief. Someone had repeatedly attempted to place Camilla inside Diana's symbolic space, and the decision had passed through offices loyal to the king. Yet when the paper trail was examined, the strongest signature was not Charles's, and the discovery unsettled everyone. Anne moved first. She took temporary control of every seating paper and ordered that no further change be made until each approval could be traced. Separate royal households were the teams of advisors and staff serving individual senior royals, and those offices often shaped ceremonial details before the family ever saw them. A name on a chart could look administrative. In reality, it could carry decades of pain, rank, and private meaning. Camilla asked to meet Anne alone. The queen admitted through that private conversation that she knew advisors wanted to strengthen her ceremonial visibility, but she insisted she had never asked them to erase Diana's place. She had believed the changes were about recognizing her current position, not replacing the woman whose memory still lived inside William. Anne listened carefully, because the difference between ambition and consent had suddenly become the heart of the crisis. William remained unconvinced. He told Catherine that silence could become consent when someone benefited from what others were doing. The prince understood that Camilla might not have written the instructions, yet he struggled to accept that she had never questioned why her name kept appearing where his mother's had once stood. Catherine reminded him that pain could distort motive, but even she could not explain the repeated revisions. Charles received the authorization file in his study. The king recognized his private secretary's initials and set the folder down so sharply that a fountain pen rolled onto the floor. The papers described the plan as a continuity initiative, meaning a coordinated effort to make Camilla's ceremonial place appear permanent and unquestioned at every future event. Its purpose was to prevent visual separation between her and previous princesses of Wales. Then Charles found the handwritten note. It ordered staff to manage William's objections only after the arrangement had been used publicly, when reversing it would cause greater embarrassment. The monarch understood the strategy at once. Someone had planned to trap his son between silence and scandal. Charles dismissed the advisor responsible, but the decision came too late. Copies of William's statement and the disputed seating plan had already left the palace. By morning, the confrontation was no longer contained within Windsor's walls, and each member of the family would have to face a new reality shaped by words that could not be withdrawn. At dawn, the palace awoke to a sentence already moving beyond its control. William's words appeared in private messages, editorial briefings, and urgent calls between royal households. Camilla's staff cancelled 2 engagements. Charles refused his morning papers. Catherine found her husband fully dressed before sunrise, standing over a photograph of Diana, and realizing that the statement meant to protect his mother had also wounded his father's wife before the entire world. Palace communications teams moved quickly, describing the dispute as a private matter concerning a commemorative seating arrangement. A commemorative arrangement was a ceremonial choice designed to honor someone's memory rather than establish active rank. The explanation sounded calm, but it avoided the real issue. William had drawn a boundary in public, and no polished statement could make that boundary disappear. William rejected a prepared clarification that would have called his words emotional and unintended. The prince insisted the message itself remained unchanged. Catherine understood why he had spoken, yet she refused to excuse the damage caused by the way he delivered it. She told him that defending Diana did not require treating Camilla as though she had no human dignity. Her words forced him to face the difference between protecting memory and punishing a living person. Charles found Camilla alone before breakfast, seated beside an unopened wardrobe. The queen consort would not prepare for an engagement where every expression, gesture, and hesitation would be examined. She removed her official engagement brooch, placed it inside its case, and told the king she would not appear publicly until she understood whether the future monarch saw her as family or contamination. Charles tried to reassure her, but his wife no longer wanted comfort without an answer. Anne brought William more disturbing news. Through a documented review of the household approvals, the Princess Royal discovered that the dismissed advisor had acted with encouragement from several senior figures. The attempt to strengthen Camilla's position had been broader than one person's ambition. William realized the problem had spread through offices that believed his grief could be managed after the decision became irreversible. Then another threat emerged. Charles was considering canceling the memorial dinner entirely. The move would spare Camilla further humiliation, but it would also erase the tribute to Diana and punish the charities attached to her legacy. William understood that the conflict had begun to consume the very remembrance he had tried to defend. Catherine refused to let that happen. Without informing either man, she requested a private meeting with Camilla. No husbands, no aides, no prepared language. The conflict had been driven by 2 men defending 2 different women, but its turning point would come when those women finally spoke without anyone else controlling the room. There were no secretaries, no prepared statements, and no monarch waiting behind the next door. Catherine entered the small Windsor sitting room alone and found Camilla beside the fireplace, still holding the engagement brooch she had refused to wear. For several seconds, neither woman spoke. Then Catherine placed Diana's original name card on the table between them and said the sentence no advisor had dared to offer. Honoring one woman should never require the public destruction of another. Catherine began with William. She explained that his attachment to the chair was rooted in childhood grief, not a campaign to remove Camilla from the royal family. The prince had learned too young that private memories could be turned into public arguments, and he now guarded his mother's place with the intensity of someone who feared losing her twice. Camilla listened without interruption, but the brooch remained tight in her hand. Camilla finally spoke through that private conversation, admitting she had entered countless rooms where Diana's absence felt more powerful than anyone present. The queen consort had often accepted palace decisions without question because objecting might make her appear insecure. Yet that silence had allowed advisors to use ceremonial recognition, the public signs of royal rank and importance, as a weapon of replacement. Catherine did not soften the truth. She told her that passive acceptance carried consequences, even when the original intention was not cruel. Every time Camilla benefited from a change without challenging it, William saw consent. The older woman lowered her eyes and confessed that his declaration had confirmed her deepest fear. She could serve the monarchy for years and still be treated as someone occupying stolen space. Catherine then asked the only question that mattered. Would Camilla voluntarily support leaving Diana's chair empty? The silence stretched. Then the Queen closed the brooch case and placed it beside the name card. She answered that some places should belong to memory. Through a written private instruction prepared after the meeting, Camilla rejected every future attempt to use Diana's personal symbols to strengthen her own position. She would accept her role without claiming the spaces tied to another woman's life. Catherine offered something in return. She promised to ask William to admit that his boundary was justified, but his public humiliation of Camilla was not. Together, the two women prepared a joint proposal, preserving the empty chair while protecting the Queen's dignity elsewhere at the memorial dinner. Pride remained the final obstacle. William and Charles still had to accept an agreement created without either man controlling it. When Catherine carried the agreement back to father and son, the monarchy's future depended not on who had won, but on who was willing to admit how much damage victory had caused. By midday, Britain was no longer debating a private seating arrangement. It was debating Diana, Camilla, grief, forgiveness, and whether a monarchy could honor its past without imprisoning everyone inside it. Outside Kensington Palace, people gathered beside the gates carrying flowers and handwritten messages. Then one newspaper released a front page that reduced the crisis to a single unforgettable image: Diana's empty chair beneath the headline, "A place no crown can claim." Broadcasters described William's declaration as the most personal rupture between the king and his heir since the transition of the crown. That transition meant the moment royal authority passed from one sovereign to the next, bringing new expectations about unity and leadership. Palace representatives refused to deny the words. Their silence confirmed what every household already knew. This had not been a misunderstanding. A real confrontation had taken place. William's supporters praised him for defending his mother against what they saw as a deliberate attempt to replace her. Others condemned the cruelty inflicted on Camilla, arguing that decades of service should not be answered with public humiliation. The argument divided sympathy itself. One side saw loyalty, the other saw punishment. Between them stood a family still trying to survive history. Charles watched the coverage with Anne and grew visibly shaken when a commentator said the monarchy was attempting to settle a private wound through ceremonial dominance. The king looked toward his sister, but she did not dismiss the criticism. Anne reminded him that symbols became dangerous when people used them to avoid honest conversation. Outside Kensington Palace, one moment briefly silenced the crowd. A young woman placed two bouquets side by side. One carried a card reading, "For Diana." The other said, "No more hatred." Cameras captured the gesture, and the message spread because it expressed what the family had failed to say. Remembrance did not have to become revenge. The palace finally released the revised memorial plan. Diana's chair would remain empty with only her engraved name card, while Camilla would sit beside Charles in a newly designated place. The Queen personally approved the wording that called the empty seat a permanent family tribute. Her decision removed any suggestion that the arrangement had been forced upon her. Public anger began to soften, but William understood the crisis was not finished. He asked to speak with Camilla before the dinner. The prince had defended the boundary, yet he now had to face the person his words had wounded. The nation had seen the chair, the headline, and the division, but the final meaning of William's declaration would be decided in one last private exchange. On the night of the memorial dinner, Diana's chair stood exactly where William had demanded it remain empty, untouched, and marked only by her name. But before the doors opened, he found Camilla waiting beside it. There were no cameras and no advisors. The heir looked at the Queen, then at the place that had carried so much grief, and finally admitted that protecting his mother's memory had not given him the right to strip another woman of her dignity. William had not changed the boundary. Diana's chair would remain a permanent memorial, while Camilla would hold a separate ceremonial position beside Charles. A ceremonial position meant the official place assigned to a senior royal during a formal gathering, carrying rank without claiming another person's private history. The compromise mattered because it ended the attempt to merge two women whose lives had become painfully connected but could never be made interchangeable. Charles accepted the arrangement and issued a documented household order stating that no personal object connected to Diana could be repurposed without the agreement of William and Harry. The king understood that these objects were not ordinary palace property. They carried memories belonging to two sons, and royal authority could not erase that emotional ownership. William faced Camilla directly. He told her his statement remained true: the chair would never become hers. But the prince also admitted that he had delivered that boundary in a way designed to wound her before the family. He apologized without asking her to forget the humiliation. Camilla accepted his words without pretending the pain had vanished. The queen confessed, during their private conversation, that she had never wanted to become Diana, and no longer wished advisors to strengthen her position through comparison. She wanted a place of her own, not one taken from a woman whose absence still shaped every person in the room. The final gesture carried more weight than any speech. William pulled out Camilla's newly assigned chair himself. She sat beside Charles, while Diana's place remained empty across the table, honored, protected, and no longer used as a weapon. Once the guests were seated, the monarch reached toward his son and briefly held his hand. William understood the message. Loyalty to his mother was not a rejection of his father. Catherine watched both symbolic places coexist and recognized the deeper victory. The family had finally separated remembrance from rivalry. William's declaration did not remove Camilla from the royal family, nor did it erase their difficult history. It established that Diana's memory would never be reassigned, while forcing everyone to accept that respect for the dead cannot depend upon cruelty toward the living. Diana's chair remained empty. Camilla took her own place, and the monarchy moved forward at last, not by rewriting its past, but by refusing to let that past destroy the people still seated around the table. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.